Welcome back, traders and investors. We have Rod David of the Marijuana Technical Trader doing his best to chart these stocks and try and identify good entry and exits level. Rod, how you doing today?
Great. How are you guys?
We're doing good. Just quickly, just give us a little bit of your background in the financial markets.
You bet. I started on the web, actually. I'd been a broker and started my own analysis on the web back in 95, 94, 95. There was a web then. One of the first technical analysis websites launched the web's first traders chat, actually, in 96. And went on to build that, sold that, went to Options Monster to just service what I'd grown into, which is rather than stocks, futures, specifically the market indexes like primarily the ES, short-term trades, some swing trades, several intraday trades, and then took that on my own and have been doing that. Launched a marijuana stock, technical analysis stock service about 6 weeks ago on MarketFi, and here we are.
Okay, so when I spoke with Alan during his April 7th interview, I asked about your decision to liquidate your modern portfolio. Can you just discuss why you did that and now, putting everything into context, what your next move is?
You bet, and that was a big day. It was a big day wanting to pull the trigger perhaps a day or two late, just being new to the community and seeing that I just wasn't finding any stocks to buy. I had some stocks that I'd bought, mostly lower, that were erasing those gains. It wasn't really a trading environment. There'd been so much hype, and it's not a bad thing to have hype in a market if the hype is over the right thing, and this was hype over performance. The performance was begetting performance and attracting new buyers, and the one big thing I love about this sector is the liquidity. Not that it's liquid, but that its liquidity is increasing all the time because so many people know about it. The GW story this morning, everybody's hearing about that, the legitimacy that the sector's getting, that the industry's getting. Sector from Morgan Stanley, industry from FDA, Sanjay Gupta. So that's a big deal. But going into that day, into the end of the week, and just not being able for days not to find anything that I could justify buying in the broader market. I'm sure you recall seeing
Correct.
NASDAQ get squeezed. Speculative premiums were getting crushed. It was biotechs were down. It was just a matter of time that rolled over to us. So pulled the trigger, and it's been several weeks of downtrend, but we may be out of the worst of it.
Okay, so when you're looking at this in the context of some of the, some of the patterns you've seen in biotech in 1990 and the internet in 1995, if you're drawing some comparisons to that, then you're, as far as potential upside here, those are, come two of the most major bull runs we've ever had in any individual sector. Is that, from going to liquidating your portfolio to now, making that kind of comparison there? Are you confident with that kind of projection?
You bet. First of two things. Number one, it's a trading portfolio, and the move sidestepped premium or collapses in the sector. You can see easily, double digit. First of all, 50%, 70% losses among stocks in the sector. Some of them, the bigger performers, that I feel comfortable not having participated in. I think a lot of the community have voiced the same appreciation for not being exposed or not having been as much exposed. But also, that's just the pattern. That's what I saw in the biotechs in 90. First they exploded, of course, and they exploded not for the same reason necessarily, but for the same reason specifically. And what I mean is, it wasn't an influx of public money so much as in '90 it was Hoffman LaRoche buying. I think it was 2/3 of Genentech. Genentech was the biggest biotech, and it represented about half the total market cap of all biotechs. The rest of them were the penny stocks or dollar stocks that we see today in the cannabis sector. And suddenly all these fund managers that had that money in Genentech, because they had to have their safe money, they had to be in Genentech, and they had to have that exposure, they wanted the exposure to biotechs, suddenly had to reinvest elsewhere in the sector. And that created the same patterns, the same exact patterns that we saw on the way up from last year through the first quarter of this year in the cannabis sector. So they too went through their own cathartic peaking. Suddenly everybody's in, or prices have risen too fast, and rather than scaring people into the stocks, they scare them out, and there's nobody left to support the pullbacks, and then we get through one of these protracted declines. So it's good it's just a cleansing effect. I'm sure you've seen dozens of these in individual stocks in sectors through the years. But what happens now, you know how the rising tide lifts all ships. Well, some of these ships are sunk. Some of the less discerning decisions that were made to get into stocks and push them unsustainably higher through March or into March's peaks, those stocks, maybe on closer scrutiny, won't attract the same kind of buying at this level. So it's going to be a little slower start. I think April 15 was a watershed day for stocks. There really wasn't any big news. There was just a low. There was pretty wanton selling, almost the inverse of what we saw at the high. Had a bounce off of there, and I think we are just now finishing a pullback. But kind of like the same thing in biotechs and internet. I won't go through that analogy,
Right.
but the same idea that now you've got all this legitimacy with Morgan Stanley coming on GWPH, and GWPH performing like that to pretty much say, look, there is this pent-up buying pressure and this interest in having something credible to be in that sector. And now the FDA, of course, with its fast track, it's not saying we find you legitimate, but it is an air of legitimacy.
Okay, I
Rod,
mean,
with
go ahead,
the
go ahead, Dennis.
GWPH there, Dennis Dicker. With the GWPH, obviously Morgan Stanley put this 103 price target up there on the stock. I think it was 103. Do you see that as as a price target that you would look at on this too? And do you also see Alan Broxing's on the show often, and he always talks about this being best of breed. Do you see that as the case with GWPH as well?
Absolutely. I liked GWPH when I started following the sector last year at 12. Love it. I think the company's great, and I have no problems with that at all. I don't analyze the company, so take that endorsement with a grain of salt. But, like Alan said, I listened to a little bit of his interview earlier. I think he said the only news from Morgan Stanley, really, because Alan's been on this way ahead of everybody. The only news was that Morgan Stanley is covering it. So a lot of that reaction up, of course, was a reaction to Morgan Stanley covering it, to the news being more disseminated. And even this morning's news, while it's generating a pop, and just let me make sure it's clear, I shorted GW last week, Thursday, into the close around 67 and change. Wrote it down, of course, on Friday, and apparently I am writing it back up pre-open, and we'll decide what to do. I've got some parameters for subscribers on what to do at the open that's already out there, but just looking for a pullback, as a trader, just playing the overbought.
Okay, so a lot of people, you're going to find some people that are saying that, this is just a fad, and that in like a year or two, people are just not going to be talking about pod stocks. Look, the fuel cell stocks had their time in the spotlight. They're back down. I mean, there's already enough supply out there, enough illegal supply. So if you're looking for companies to, supply marijuana and load up on them and think the whole country is gonna be legalizing it, you're probably not gonna make money there. I mean, what would you say to somebody that says, "Hey, this is just a fad and it's passing, and in a year or two, people are just not even gonna be talking about this sector"?
Sure, I bet. I bet I've met those people, like the people that told me internet stock or the internet was going to be the new CB radio phase or fad. So
Joel, what
yeah,
about your dad? What did your dad fade back in the 60s? Wasn't it
Well, he
TV or
never
something?
faded it, but he said TV wouldn't make it. He said who would
TV wouldn't make
he
it.
said who would want to sit around in their living room and watch a little box, when they could be out, doing things like going to the horse races and things like that. And also he said McDonald's, who's going to pay a nickel for a weak cup of coffee and a dime for, and I won't use the word he used to describe the hamburger. But anyways, go ahead, Alan. Sorry about that.
well,
Not
I'm with
Alan,
him
Rod.
actually.
Rod,
But
sorry.
as far as spot stocks go, or as far as the industry goes, I'm not the expert. I just think that this is nevertheless going in one direction and not the other. Whatever the pace is another issue. Whatever the societal pushback, the political ramifications, those are obstacles, I suppose, along the road, and real issues that matter to real people, and they should. But that doesn't change that there's a real industry here, that there's, for better or worse, this is where it's at and the direction that it's heading.
Well, what's in
But
the
when
industry?
sorry?
But what is it? Is it the supply of marijuana? Is it the medicinal purposes? I mean, what is the driver?
I don't get into that. What I get into is, first of all, the technicals, and
Okay.
just generally seeing the similarities in what I witnessed personally while trading the biotech sector, while trading internet stocks during those phases, and being totally prepared for long, drawn-out pullbacks. I was just as long as anybody else during the run-up in the marijuana stocks. So I was just as excited about their long-term potential, and I still hold some that I held into the high that are in the investment portion of my portfolio. But as far as being able to find something viable, there's a lot more now than there was then. So I like the sector. I didn't start the service just to take advantage of there's a lot of work to start a service, to start
Correct.
this marijuana stock technical trader on MarketFi. And there's a lot of work involved in that, and it's not a big payoff if it's just for that one phase or that one call or the next call that this might be a bottom. I see this as a longer-term growing industry, and just generally, experientially, not being new to the investment world, a lot of good signs going on.
Well, I mean, you're making those comparisons. I mean, if you live and traded through the biotech's ups and downs, and as well as the internet. I mean, there's using that as a premise and drawing the comparisons on that. There's no way that you can, anyone can make a valid argument that, there's not huge potential. And, if you're following the kind of analysis that, you're doing on the stocks here, you're trying to follow them. You're trying to find, defined, entries, risk reward ratios. If you go about it that way, then you're giving yourself a chance. But just to go out and blindly buy, a basket of these stocks and whatnot, you're putting yourself out to risk. But when you put it in that perspective of the biotech and the internet sector, I mean, if we could hit a replay on those buttons, we would, we all know what we do in the market. Are you still following the biotech sectors? I mean, obviously your technical analysis extends to other sectors and other stocks, correct?
Absolutely, and I only follow anything in the context of charting and technical analysis. So I certainly follow sectors, just intramarket analysis, and that's, as I said, one of the clues I had that that any highly speculative stock or sector was about to face difficulty was back in March when the biotechs were getting crushed. I do intermarket analysis among different asset classes, but also different indexes. The NASDAQ, if you compare that to Dow and S&Ps ahead of March's peaks, you can see that index that is more speculative relatively than the Dow, obviously, was underperforming, wasn't making higher highs with the broader market. So, to that degree, yeah, I definitely follow. As far as the news, other than the crossover, like a GW into the biotech sector, no, nothing specific.
Okay, I mean, just to finish up the interview here, just like the bio, I mean, has the bubble, I mean, from a technical perspective, I think I know what your answer is going to be. Has the bubble burst in the biotech sector? I'm looking at the IBB here, the ETF. I was also looking at the trading action in Biogen last week, and Gilead not really on, on their stellar earnings. And the move into value stocks, has the bubble finally burst in the biotech sector?
Yeah, as far as bursting, it's bursted and off. I think that what you see in these patterns is that the bottoms are a different shape than the tops. They're a different pace. They're a different degree. They're definitely deeper as far as the number of issues that remain saturated, that remain under pressure, while some of the bigger names start getting bought back up. So we may be at that phase. A number of them may still have some lower objectives. I don't really want to get too into specific stocks that aren't in the marijuana sector.
Okay.
Because I don't have a
Okay, I
follow up on
understand.
that. But basically, yeah, I think it's premature to say that the whole sector's coming back.
Okay,
But
all
there's
right.
certainly some values.
Yeah, no, just because you've been in it to win it for so long with these stocks and following and stuff. I just said something Dennis and I have been talking a lot about lately. So, Rod, thanks a lot for coming on. I'm certainly going to keep your thoughts in mind here. Regarding the comparisons you're making between the marijuana sector and the biotech and the '90s and the internet. Be interesting to follow. Thanks for taking time out on your busy morning here to join us here on Benzinga's pre-market prep. We'd love to have you back on again.
I look forward to it. Thanks for today.
Thank you, Rod.